Now, while MPs in Westminster consider the wisdom of being part of the EU, SNP politicians at their conference in Inverness this weekend are, as usual, considering the wisdom of being part of the UK. Of course, they've got a bit of a spring in their step now. Their manifesto promised a referendum on independence, but now there's talk of another option, independence light, or devolution max. It really depends which way you're coming at it, what it means. Still no date, however, for when any referendum might be held. So joining me now from Inverness is Scotland's Finance Secretary, John Swinney. Mr Swinney, welcome to the Daily Politics. Before I get on to independence light or devo max or whatever you want to call it, can I just ask you, your administration has been boasting about how your Plan McB is doing much better than Mr Osborne's Plan A. But the Scottish economy, I've just seen from the figures, is flatlining just as badly as the whole of the British economy.
Well, the Scottish economy delivered as much growth in the second quarter as the UK economy,
yes, no
and
better.
The growth is modest. But I think what the decisive difference is the fact that unemployment in Scotland is lower than the rest of the UK. Unemployment levels are higher. Now that's an indication of the fact that we've used...
points. It's almost nothing, and state spending is much bigger in Scotland, so you would expect it.
Well, for the people that are affected by being in employment and not being in employment, it matters a great deal, Andrew, and it's a consequence of the way in which we've used our investment, particularly in capital investment, to support the long-term future of Scotland. And what concerns me about the approach taken by the UK government is that they've reduced capital expenditure, in our sense in Scotland, by 36% over the course of the spending review, and that's going to be a direct threat to economic recovery in Scotland. It's why I've boosted capital spending programmes by the flexibility I already have access to within Scotland to try to support employment and growth within our country.
If everything's so great in Scotland, why is life expectancy between the Scots and the English now widening? You're dying earlier than people of England. And it's widening.
Well, that's in certain parts of Scotland.
Sure.
Well, it's in certain parts of Scotland that is an issue, and it's about long-term health issues which are connected with alcohol and tobacco and poor standards of living. And what the Scottish Government is, that's why we're taking forward measures, for example, such as minimum pricing of alcohol, to interrupt the fact that it is deemed acceptable currently for us to flood the market with very cheap alcohol, which has very damaging consequences for individuals, and why we're trying to tackle that and to encourage people to lead a healthier lifestyle and to take more modest approaches towards alcohol and tobacco consumption. So there's a public health agenda that we have to take forward, which is an integral part of the approach on the economy. OK, well,
good luck with that, Mr Swinney. Let's come to this issue of independence, which I know has galvanised your conference, because the polls have been going your way, and of course you form a majority administration in Edinburgh at the moment. Why not just have your referendum now? I mean, are you what we Scots would call just a big fearty, which I'll translate as a big chap who's rather frightened?
I'm glad you gave that translation for the benefit of others, but I knew exactly the term you were referring to, Andrew. No, not for me. I didn't need any translation. But what we said in the election in May was that we would have a referendum in the latter stages of this Parliament. Now, you know, one of the things that we get, and we sometimes get it from people like yourself, Andrew, is why don't you just stick to the things that you said to people, honour your manifesto commitments? Now, that's precisely what we're going to do. We'll have a referendum in the latter part of this Parliament.
Give us a date.
We'll give people the choice.
OK, when will it be?
It'll be later in the Parliament.
I know that. When?
Well, it'll be later in the Parliament.
No, I know that. When?
Well, it'll be later in the Parliament.
I know that. When?
And we'll specify the date. Well, we'll specify the date when the time is right.
Will you do it on the anniversary of
Bannockburn?
Will you do it on the anniversary of Bannockburn? I mean, that would be a really great decision for a forward-looking country to have an independence vote on the anniversary of a medieval battle.
Well, if that's your interesting suggestion, we will of course consider it, Andrew.
Yeah, and you haven't, Mr Swinney. Do you think I came up the Clyde the banana boat?
Is that we'll have a referendum in the latter part of the Parliament exactly when we said it would do. And the one kind of technical point that you didn't mention in that is that the manifesto we stood on was endorsed by about 45% of the electorate in Scotland and gave us a majority in the Parliament for the very first time. And that's a mandate that I think people in the UK government should begin to respect in all that they do.
But you won't give us, all the Scottish people, the debate. This independence light or Devo max or whatever you want to call it, can we just do a quick checklist? Under independence light or Devo max, there'd be no Scottish army, correct?
I think the concept of another option short of independence well, hear me out. has got to be fully defined by those who would argue for that proposition. Now, the Scottish Government, in our proposals before the election, set out how a model of this could look like. And you're right, defence would be an issue reserved to the United Kingdom under that type of model. But it's for those who advocate the concept of strengthened powers for Scotland within the United Kingdom, short of independence, to define that proposition. And the Scottish Government will engage very constructively and purposefully with an increasing number of people who argue for that approach.
But just in 5 seconds, Mr. Swinney, you're still going for the full Monty? Seat in the United Nations,
I'm going for the full
separate
Monty.
army, and all the rest of it. Yeah?
I want Scotland to be in a position to be a progressive country that is moving forward, that's generating wealth and can take its own decisions. And for me, that means independence.
All right, Mr. Swinney, thank you very much. We'll let you get back to your conference. Only a few seconds. Is Scottish independence now unstoppable?
I don't think it's unstoppable. I don't think it's likely.
You don't think it's likely?
But what you'll see in the next few years is a deliberate attempt by the SNP to drive a wedge between Edinburgh and London by highlighting issues such as the NHS reform down here and slow growth.
I'm sorry we've run out of time, but thank you for being with us.